Lost a pair of glasses? No? If you have, you can come and get them. Morning. Can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Dumfries and Galloway Council. As members will be aware, the meeting has been called as a result of a motion being submitted by 25% of the Council recalling under Standing Order 18, the decision of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee on 19th of December under item 3, the Whitesands project. The decision of the committee was to publish the Whitesands project in early January. Obviously, a recall motion entitles the signatories to have a decision reconsidered if it meets the terms of Standing Order 18. It does not allow them to automatically overturn a decision of a committee. I therefore took the decision as leader to call an early meeting of full council to consider this matter rather than delay it, which would have in effect overturned the decision of the committee without the authority of either the committee or full council, and in my view that is not acceptable. Members will also be aware that the Whitesands project is reliant on Scottish Government funding of up to £20 million. The Government have made a commitment to fund 80% of the project during the first phase of the £42 million per annum budget to support the flood protection schemes. Clearly, if we delay decisions on the project, then my fear is it will put at risk this funding as more and more projects from other parts of Scotland come forward, hence the reason for the early meeting. Rona, can I have said it and apologies?
Yes, thank you, Leader. We have apologies this morning from Councillors Davidson, Diggle, Dykes, Gilroy, Hislop, Thompson and Witts. And as we start the meeting, Councillors Carson, Foster, Yen, McGregor and Scobie are not present. There are accordingly 35 members present at the start of the meeting.
Do members have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, move on to item 3, which is Standing Order 18, EEI Committee, 19th of December 2016, and the approval to publish a scheme. The first decision is for members to consider whether or not the requisition received in respect to the decision made by the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee on the 19th of December 2016 in relation to the Whitesands project meets the provision of Standing Order 18. I have to say there is nothing within the requisition that members of the committee were not fully aware of when they took their decision on the 19th of December. Simply because you don't agree with a decision is not a sufficient reason for a recall under the terms of Standing Order 18. That said, it has always been the Labour Group's position that Standing Order should not be in place and members should be entitled to recall a decision for debate irrespective of the reason. So although many of the signatories of the requisition consistently vote against recall motions being debated, I don't intend to follow that lead, and I would move that the requisition be debated if members are in agreement. Okay. The next matter to be considered is whether to proceed with the decision taken by EEI Committee on the 19th of December 2016. Alistair Speedy and Stephen Herriot are in attendance to answer any queries. I will open the matter up for members. Ian?
Thanks, Leader, and thanks for moving it. We do actually consider it today. I think that's respectful. I mean, ultimately, I put my name to that mandate to bring it back under Standing Order 18 because I feel that it's the actual decision that we took on Monday past, that we shouldn't be going forward with that we should actually be looking at it fully. Because of the increase in cost between November 15 and December 16, I mean, I worked it out, it was approximately, if you take it on an average of 50 weeks, and it went from a baseline cost, and it was a key consideration, the cost for picking that particular option at the time, was the baseline cost was around about £50 million. And the highline cost coming in at this option now, with amendments over the last year, is coming at £25 million. That's £200,000 a week approximately, an increase in charge. I think it's in the public interest, absolutely in the public interest, that we see the fully costed out details in regards to that, and that is all I ask for, is we have a report back to Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee, looking at the full costs. To try and put that into context, certainly it's no apples and apples, but it's similar. If you drive from here to Annan, you come across a road that was just constructed recently between Crotherston and Kinmount Street. That's 3.6 kilometres of road for £9.6 million. Now it's way bigger. It's no apples for apples, but it's similar. It's the same type of civil engineering works that's undertaken. There'll be over 15 kilometres worth of roads. You can go over to Dunraget and compare that now as well, which comes way under the budget we're looking at here. I think there's potentially better solutions, better cost in which to bring this flood protection to the Whitesands in particular. I mean, I do think we've got other options that we can look at, but we need to see the cost. It's in the public interest that we do see the cost, and sure, I would move that that's the case, that we see a further report to the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee at its earliest convenience, looking at the full cost and appraising the three options again as we go forward.
I think everybody's got this, which gives you the detail that you're looking for, and I think that was the decision of the EI committee anyway. Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second them.
Okay, Ian,
Thanks, Chair. I would move the decision that was taken at the EI. As far as I am concerned, this was a vote on whether to publish or not. Everything that's being asked for in terms of detail, financing, the capital financing, I believe was covered in that decision. The only difference between the amendment and the motion was whether to publish or not. Once you publish, then you can see what you're actually dealing with. And the Chair obviously also agreed to publish the costings of the options that were discussed in November 2015. I think there was an earlier vote just on whether we actually leave this until after the next election, which I said on public record that I felt was an abrogation of responsibility for any responsible council, and I'll stand by that. So I would move the decision that we took.
Before you do that, I was going to move an amendment, but and I'd ask you, listen, we've got to say on this, I would move an amendment to proceed with the decision taken by the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee on 19th of December. We're actually meeting here today, almost a year since the Whitesands, and much of the region was hit firstly by Storm Desmond and then by Storm Frank. It left homes and businesses devastated, as Dumfries continued the shameful record as the largest town in Scotland that continues to flood on a regular basis. It's also just over a year since this council unanimously agreed to the proposals for the Whitesands project. Since then, as the design has been fully developed, the scheme has actually been improved yet further, with more parking added and the height of the defences have been reduced. The scheme is significantly different from the early drafts that included a large embankment rather than the current raised walkway. That's in no small part due to input from the public in what has been several years of extensive consultation. Having voted unanimously to proceed with the scheme a year ago and to delegate to Offa's authority to develop the scheme at a considerable cost to a position whereby it is ready to be published under the relevant flood risk management, it really would beg a belief if we suddenly said we've changed our mind. Frankly, it would bring this council into disrepute and throw away a once-in-a-generation opportunity to tackle a flooding problem that has plagued the regional capital for longer than anyone in this room can remember. The issue of funding has been raised as a reason to put this project on hold, but that's a red herring. When members agreed the scheme in November 2015, the figures being quoted were between £15 and £18 million. Were not only in 2016 prices, but were specifically for construction costs. It was made clear it did not include, for example, design costs. The updated estimate of just below £21 million not only covers the design costs, but takes account of construction inflation, design work and improvements made to the scheme as a direct result of the public consultation. The requisition makes mention of the two other options involving a rising barrier that were unanimously rejected by members in November 2015. Leaving aside the fact that there were a number of reasons over and above the cost of the schemes for members rejecting these alternatives, the estimates for construction alone for those alternative schemes were between 19 million and 23 million pound for one scheme and 22 million and 26 million pounds for the other. Again, both these estimates were in 2016 prices, excluded design costs, construction inflation and any risk pot, which when added would obviously continue to make them far more expensive than the preferred option, as officers made absolutely clear at the meeting on the 19th of December. Notwithstanding the fact that the committee agreed to include the updated detailed costings for all three schemes in a future capital report, to pretend that somehow those two alternatives are not more expensive than the preferred option is not being honest with the public. I'm sorry, if you're going to start making noises, can you leave the room, please? We're in a meeting. This is a council meeting. However, as I have said, the issue around cost is a red herring. The decision members took on 19th of December was to publish the proposals to allow the public to have their say on the detailed design. Councillors agreed not to award any additional funding because the agreed council contribution already covers more than 20% of the projected costs. Should any further funding be needed over and above this to cover any contingencies, and that's still very much a big if, that would have to come before both the EEI Committee and Policy and Resources Committee. It was also noted at the committee that until we have the tenders for the work and the start date for that work to begin, we obviously won't have a final cost, which is exactly the position with every single capital project. However, you can't invite tenders until you have the necessary planning permission, and you won't get the necessary planning permission unless we publish the actual scheme. If we do not agree with the committee's decision, this won't be just delaying a decision for a month or so. If councillors suddenly decided they wanted to go with one of the two alternatives previously rejected, we face over a year of delays until that alternative is fully designed to allow it to be published. And let's not be in any doubt, delaying the Whitesands project today will mean a delay in both the Langham and Newton Stewart projects, as officer time is spent redesigning the Whitesands instead of moving on to our other two priority projects. The more we delay the Whitesands decision, even by a month or two, the more costs will increase and the higher the risk is of the government simply taking their funding elsewhere. I'm not prepared to see that happen. I would therefore formally move that we continue with the decisions taken by the committee on the 19th of December. Okay.
I'm happy to second the leader's amendment. We agreed the preferred scheme more than a year ago, and after a considerable amount of debate, and rejected the alternative rising barrier options for very good reasons. Frankly, what the committee agreed on the 19th of December to publish the scheme is the routine next stage in taking that decision forward. There'll be a lot more decisions to make before we see work beginning on the ground. In fact, there is every possibility that the planning process could result in further refinements to the scheme, depending on the feedback. As we've heard today, some believe that the recent cost estimates mean we should put out the whole project on hold until we revisit the two schemes previously rejected. Officers, however, have made clear that the work they carried out, updating costs for the preferred option, shows that any increase in cost to take account of construction inflation and to include design costs is relevant for every one of these options. If anything, the risk associated with the rising barrier options, and particularly the option that would involve constructing the scheme within the river itself, would be even higher than the preferred option. But in case any member is in doubt, which option is the cheapest, the figures for all three schemes will be included in the committee's next capital report. I think if the council can learn one lesson from this, it's to ensure that when costs for a project are published, what they cover or don't cover is stressed. However, we should try and put this in context. The Elgin Flood Protection Scheme, which was published nearly a decade ago, cost $86 million. The Selkirk scheme completed last month cost over $31 million. The Hoyk scheme, currently out for public consultation, is estimated to cost over $36 million. I'm not sure why some people think that Dumfries should have a flood protection scheme built on the cheap. So I'm happy to second that amendment by the leader.
Graham?
Thank you, Leader. I unfortunately couldn't attend the meeting on whatever date it was, the 19th or something, and that was one of the reasons that I signed the call back. I have serious concerns about the cost of the scheme. It has escalated from 15 to 25 now. We were handed a sheet of paper just as we come in the door there, which outlines and I haven't had time to read that, but I'm concerned as to where the cost will finish up. We've gone from 15 to 25. Inevitably, once you start breaking ground, there will be things that will be found that we don't know about, and unfortunately there could be extra costs added in there. I'm equally concerned about the water levels upstream. Yes, the river will flow quicker, but to get the river to flow quicker, you've got to get a head of water behind it. And when you close, you don't put a 3-inch pipe below a 6-inch pipe. You don't have water running out a 6-inch pipe into a 3-inch pipe. That doesn't work. And that's what we're meaning to do. We're taking a wider river and channeling it into a much narrower space. So I've got problems that there will be backwatering upstream of the town. And we've already seen in the past serious flooding issues on farmland north of Dumfries. There's been a relatively low percentage of the residents of Dumfries have actually approved of this, and that gives me concern as well. But I've always been a great advocate that we should be buying the properties that are on the Whitesands, which do flood, and either knocking them down, or if that's inappropriate, doing something with them to make them, what's the word I would use, flood averse. There is already one property which floods frequently, and the owner of the property has taken very good measures to make his property flood proof or flood resistant. And so that's one of the reasons that I signed this call back. And I would have to say that I just think the scheme is in danger of escalating, and that gives me great concern.
Stephen?
Thank you, Leader. If I could just come in, maybe pick up some of those points for Councillor Nicholl. In terms of maybe just working back the way through them as I've noted them down, and you can let me know if I haven't covered them all for you. But in terms of the options that were looked at in the past and removing properties or making more flood resilient, there's been a lot of public engagement, a lot of public consultation through the process. But we kind of look back to the scheme starting to really evolve as a public realm scheme and been more about trying to enhance the area on the Whitesands as well as offer the flood protection from the views that came out of the 4 days that we had as part of the charrette process back in 2012. And that fed into the master plan for the Whitesands area that's on the council's website as supplementary planning guidance. And again, the kind of detail that came out of that was looking more at the raised walkway. Since then, we've done quite a lot of work on the other options, and there were the 2 self-rising barrier options that were discounted by the EEI committee in November 2015, and that we have kind of continued. And this is the scheme that has evolved on the basis of what has come out of feedback, or with the embankment being too high, looking at dropping the level and making it a raised walkway with barriers that would be in place, glass panels and demountables on top to try and address some of the concerns and the landscape impact. In terms of the backwatering and concerns, and again, that's something, the hydraulic modelling, a lot of time has been spent on that, and we covered in the EEI committee report to November that we'd actually dropped the height of the defences by about 200 millimetres as we would have refined the hydraulic model. So the work on the modelling has continued, and it was informed by the December 2015 flood events and last year, and we were able to use that data to refine the model and improve as we move forward with the detailed design. What the modelling has shown is that there is some slight increase in water levels upstream due to the scheme, but that can be mitigated if we remove, as we've now included within the scheme, some of the gravel in and around the Devergilla Bridge, and that we can get the water flowing faster through that structure, and that is less of an obstruction in the river level. And we're confident in hydraulic modelling in terms of the council's engineering resource having an input to that and an oversight of that, but using our specialist consultants to do the hydraulic modelling for us, and the kind of verification process that we've been through with SEPA. We had SEPA along at the public engagement sessions recently, just to show that they're still engaged in the process, and that we see that their input is vital and critical, just to making sure that our modelling work is robust and that the scheme that we deliver is acceptable to them as one of our main partners under the local under the flood risk management legislation. In terms of the cost of the scheme, I can talk through the spreadsheet if that's required in terms of the data we've put round. But I would echo what has been said by the leader in terms of the construction costs being reported back in November 15, being used to compare options, and the options in the self-rising barriers at 5 metres off the river wall and the self-rising barrier on the river wall being more expensive than the option that we decided, or that the committee decided on back in November 15, for other reasons other than costs as well. There's the kind of technical reasons and the environmental impact reasons as well, that was taken forward as a preferred option. The costs in any scheme, as soon as we open up the ground, there are unknowns, not completely unquantifiable, but we can hit soft ground, we can hit utilities that are not in the right place, and the risk pot that we're reporting in the EI committee report of about £4 million is part of that would be to cover those kind of unknowns that might arise through the construction process, that might require slight tweaks to the design to be able to realise the scheme on the ground. I think maybe that covered the points that you'd raised, Councillor.
Okay, Ian.
Thank you, Leader. I've got one observation and two questions, hopefully, that could be answered fairly easily. The observation is the comments that Councillor Thompson made when he listed numerous flood defence schemes and their various costs. I think it should also be noted that most of these are actually in areas of population, and obviously the Whitesands is not. The first question, when I noticed from the 10th of November report, there was a £5 million low rising to £7 million, 17.8 high. The first one had a 12.5% contingency fund, and then it rose to 25%. I noticed from the comments that were just made that you mentioned there were £4 million set aside for contingencies. In the rising contingency fund, I would have thought that it should have been a lot more, bearing in mind the other ones. There also a mention in the report of the 200 millimetre reduction in the flood defences. There's absolutely no mention whatsoever about that. That must be a cost-saving element as well, and I would like a breakdown of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Yes, the costs that were reported to November 16 EI committee reflect that reduced level, that 200 mil level reduction along a significant part of the scheme. So the costs that have been developed over the past year since between reports to the EI committee will reflect that reduction in the embankment, in terms of forming the embankment, primarily in terms of the earthworks costs. The range in contingencies is very much the way we've reported this in the past, that we've looked at the construction costs, which include a range of preliminaries. Now, the preliminaries are kind of costs that would be allowed for within a contract, that they're kind of the contractor's costs that are not directly attributable to the work. So it's the length of time the contractor's on the site, his site mobilisation, his site costs, and other kind of overheads like that. And we've reported a kind of range in preliminaries when we looked at the cost estimates back in November 2015. And you're right, that ranged from an option of 12.5% prelims to 20% prelims. And again, that's very much looking for cost certainty in terms of the actual works costs will really only start to be tied down with the tender return and then the agreed price that we award on. Over and above that, cost certainty really only does kind of firm up as we go through the contract and we see that there are maybe claims that maybe need to draw down on the risk pot. So this kind of high level of contingency we think is quite adequately reflected in the risk pot. We're looking at a £4 million risk pot for the scheme, and we believe that's quite significant, and that is an uplift on the contingency rates that we had been looking at a year ago. But what that reflects is an analysis, it's kind of a risk management analysis of all the kind of downsides when we're on site, what could happen, what could go wrong, and what might the cost of that be. And then we look at a kind of probability of that outturning, and our risk pot is set at £4 million to cover those risks that may not materialise, but that we are prepared in terms of funding if they do so.
Andrew?
Thank you, Leader. Greatly appreciate you actually hearing this today. With sitting on both the audit and risk and scrutiny committees, I'm really keen to hear as much as possible and to see this debated here today. My concern that I would have, well, the first thing is I would like clarification on 3.38, where it talks about the multitude of savings. Can you give us a figure on the savings to date?
If, in terms of the handout, the information that was circulated in the tables, if I could turn your attention to page 6 of 6, this is a spreadsheet that we've kind of pulled together to try and maybe answer some of the queries this morning on the costs. If I could just explain the spreadsheet to members, what we've done down the left-hand column is identified the elements of the construction cost, the kind of major elements that comprise the scheme. So site clearance, surfacing works, the actual flood prevention itself. And what we're doing is we're comparing the 2015 cost that were reported to the EEI committee with an equivalent 2016 cost. So what we've done is we've looked at the same costs and factored up where we think these increases in costs are as the design currently stands. And then we've added in something for preliminaries, and we've added in something for contingencies at the bottom to give us an equivalence back to the £15 million cost that we're reporting in 2015. What it does show is that we reckon there are some savings as the design is developed, and there's been a bit of work done on refining that design, as well as increases in places. We reckon there's some savings in the site clearance, that we can realise some savings in the surfacing works over the previous estimates, that we can realise savings in the street furniture, in the works that we're doing to the Deveragilla Bridge, as that kind of the detail progresses through consultation with Historic Environment Scotland. And we also reckon that there's some savings to be had in the environmental improvements, and those savings are offset by where we think where the pluses are in that fourth column, that third column of figures, to come to the £4 million difference between the two cost estimates. There are a number of pluses there where we think there are increased costs as well as reduced costs. So in terms of the design and the kind of risk assessment of the costing process, we've identified areas where there are some savings as well as areas where we think there are some increases in the costs associated with the works.
Graham?
That's what Councillor Nicholl mentioned, the cost from 15 to 25 million. It just seems to be endless. You never know, it could be up to 40 or 50 million the way things are going. But what concerns me is a couple of questions here for Mr. Herriot, is the drainage issues. There's a lot of issues there with Scottish water coming to various properties in the Whitesands. I've got concerns about that. Obviously, contingency fund, is there enough money there? And also as well, my family's line is chartered accountancy and whatnot. I've got concern about the shopkeepers' compensation package, and long-term compensation for these shopkeepers as well. Hard-working people, backbone of Dumfries Dumfries. We need the shopkeepers. I've got concerns that how are you going to work out a compensation package for them, construction package compensation, and the wider town as well. It's going to suffer. We're going to suffer. I've not had one constituent come forward me who wants this scheme. Not one, and I don't want it.
Andy?
Thanks, Leader, for letting me in.
Chair, Leader, they're not answering the questions about the compensation.
Okay, Stephen?
So there's a number of points raised there, Councillor.
Yeah.
The drainage issues, yes. I mean, that is an issue in terms of the design it develops. Scottish Water are involved with us. We are realising that in our work with Scottish Water that they have quite a bit of work to input to the design in terms of the surface water systems, the foul systems, and that's certainly part of the significant cost that we have within the project is the storage for the surface water systems and the pump storage that's required to deal with the foul systems. So that is a design issue, and it's something that will develop as the detailed design of the scheme evolves. It is quite a high scheme cost for what you see above ground, and a lot of those costs are associated with the works in the infrastructure below ground and the drainage, and that's reflected in the cost estimate. The contingencies allowance, the kind of comments on that, I think is, I refer back to what I said before, that the £4 million has been based on an assessment working with the engineers and the quantity surveyor in terms of inputting the cost consultancy side, and there's been a lot of work done on that in terms of the risk assessment and evaluating what the contingencies and the risk pot should be. So we're quite confident in terms of what's currently been put forward to reflect the full scheme design. And again, we put that full scheme design cost to Scottish Government to make sure that we can kind of maximise the drawdown from them at 80%. In terms of the compensation element, there's work to be done as we go forward with affected businesses in establishing what the kind of baseline conditions are, and there's an opportunity through the construction process and the works of establishing if there's an impact on their profitability, on their turnover during the works processes, and we can certainly consider that as part of the scheme. Under the legislation, there is that opportunity for compensation.
Okay, Andy, this time.
Thanks, Leader. My view, Kenny, is that the EEI decision was a process decision, and we firmly believe that people have the right to have their views heard. The only formal way for that to take place is for this scheme to go forward. That, of course, will trigger the public rights and allow subsequent processes to kick in. Now, I've got absolutely no doubt that both the supporters and the opponents will use all the tools at their disposal in that proper process. And I think that needs to be recognised. This is not the end of a process. This is merely the start of a process. And as I say, I have no doubt people will avail themselves of the rights that the process will give them. I think that's all I need to say on that.
Jane?
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ferguson has more or less said it, and I'd echo that. I am assuming, Leader, that there will be plenty of other decisions to be made. There is a tender process to go through. At that stage, we will be able to see whether this does represent good value for money, whether it does not represent good value for money. And we have the opportunity of going through the process at that stage. I'm sure the officers will help us and tell us what the stages would be of that. I think it would be useful for the public to hear. Speaking as someone who has been tepid about this proposal, actually, since the beginning, I really was quite half-hearted about it. I have changed my mind over the last couple of months, having the opportunity to look at it, to examine the report that came to E&I, and to look at how we were going to deal with a problem which, frankly, provides disruption and misery for the travelling public, particularly for the public that travel on public transport, And people forget, actually, that the misery is compounded by the fact that these happen in wet weather. People are miserable. It's a hideous time to go round Dumfries and be to find your car parking disrupted, your ability to get onto public transport. So I'm actually representing, I think, the views of people who travel from out with Dumfries into Dumfries during these times and try and get home. I would therefore ask again for reassurance about the stages that we will go through in order for us to examine this again, please, Leader. And I think probably my final thing that I would say is to possibly adapt a phrase of the Duke of Wellington's, which was publish and be damned.
Stephen?
So, yes, if I could come back in. Thank you, Leader. In terms of the stages and taking committee decisions and keeping committee involved in the process, for me, it would be appropriate, and certainly just thinking when it would be that we would come back to committee as we go through in the future of the scheme as it develops. When we publish and we receive the potential if we receive objections, certainly at that point it would be appropriate to come back to EI committee and report on that process and give recommendations on how we might resolve those objections or how we might need to deal with an inquiry. After we've cleared that and we've cleared objections, again, I think it would be appropriate to inform committee of that process. Detailed design will need to develop to get us to a stage where we can prepare tender documentation. And on a final scheme, prior to going to tender, we'd be looking for committee approval to go to tender with effectively what would be the final scheme, the scheme tied down and defined in the tender documentation. And then post-tender, when we want to make an award, we'd be looking for a committee decision on that. As well as through construction phases, there would be a need to brief in terms of major project and how we're managing the impacts on the town centre.
Colin Wiper, then Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Page 6 of 6. The contingencies in the 2016 cost is 2,119,339. And if you look at page 2, where there's a contingencies at the bottom is 3.970. I take it that the 2,119 is included in the 3,970, but I'd like to know why that has risen almost doubled. And just picking one figure out of the 216 cost in 6 of 6. Forum steps has doubled from 158 to 350. Well, it's actually more than doubled. 350,000. These are things that I would like to know more detail about. I'd also like to know is the 15,044 in the 2015 cost, including all the things that weren't included in the 19,074 cost, because that doesn't include all the stuff that's on page 2, where it takes it up to 23,818. There's so many questions in here that really need answered and answered in detail, that for every million, I mean, if it's 3 million that the council was having to put in for a £15 million project, it rises to 5 million at £25 million. So the council's put an extra £2 million into this, when this council is saying that it's got no money, can't provide services to the public, but suddenly they can come up with an extra £2 million for a project which has actually risen by 60-odd%. I think there's far too many questions to be answered, and I would like answers to the two that I posed earlier. Thank you.
Stephen?
If I could just pick up on some of those points for Councillor Wiper. The contingencies, yes, we're looking at effectively what I'm reporting on page 6 of 6 on the spreadsheet, comparing the 2015 and the 2016 costs. The contingencies of 1.671 million in 2015, to give me an equivalent figure to show a cost increase of about 4 million, we're looking at the same level of contingencies on the 16.954 million. So it's to get an equivalent figure to show where a cost increase has arisen. And those contingencies are effectively reported in the scheme cost. We've taken them out and separated from the construction, the works cost, and we're showing them in the overall scheme cost at 4 million. And again, as I said, with the work with the QS and the work with the design team and the kind of risk-based approach to quantifying the outturns gives us with a bit of a £4 million risk pot that is effectively how we're reflecting what the contingencies might be within the total scheme cost of 25 million. The forming the steps, the doubling of that in terms of the costs, again, as the design has progressed, and it's the balance between a low-cost scheme, I would imagine, or an economic scheme, or a low-cost scheme is probably the best way to say it. The balance between a low-cost scheme and something that is appropriate for the Whitesands and the environment, and trying to deliver an improvement in the public realm. And I think certainly as the landscape architects have had more work and the design has evolved, we have seen some of the details, some of the costs and some of the details, as well as some of them be able to be decreased. We have looked at more forming a feature on the embankments themselves. And part of that's got to do with, certainly in and around the Devergilla Bridge, is making sure that what we are putting in place is appropriate for the landscape, the visual, the aesthetic issues that Historic Environment Scotland are concerned with. So yes, there is an increase in the cost in the estimates that we've got before you for some of those features. The cost that I'm showing on page 6 of 6, again, it comes back to this. Some of the costs we've reported are construction costs. And as I said, the November 2015 costs that were reported were construction costs, to do a kind of reflection of what the tender outturn cost might be by way of a comparison. And then the scheme cost that we're reporting is the additional cost. So it's the risk pot, the fees, the design fees, the supervision fees, the land costs, the legal costs, which can be quite significant, and that we've added into the November 2016 EI report, so that we're demonstrating to Scottish Government what the full range of what we are claiming to be all the eligible costs that we'd be looking for 80% intervention on. So apologies if it's slightly misleading or slightly confusing, that we're talking about construction costs in some places and scheme costs in another, but I think we need to appreciate that the construction costs are our workings to look at and evaluate what the tender cost might be with a particular contractor, and then the scheme costs we're reporting to Scottish Government so that we can maximise the eligible costs that we can claim and we can draw down funding for. And we have, just this year, we've actually received over £1 million from Scottish Government against this scheme alone, as part of the historic costs that we've incurred and part of the 80% of the costs that we're incurring in this current financial year. My last kind of point, I think, was about the budgets that we're using, that most of this is funded through the capital budgets and the capital investment strategy, and that's managed in consultation with our colleagues in finance, and it is very much separate in terms of the large costs for the scheme that we're talking about in relation to new works on the ground. It is part of the understanding of the capital budgeting rather than the revenue budgeting process that we're occupied with at the present time as well.
Jeff.
Thank you, Leader. Speaking as someone who worked for a number of years in an office down the bottom of the Vennel and suffered 3 major flood incidents in 6 years, it is incredibly traumatic to actually think this could happen every year. You know, your existence to a large extent during the winter is blighted by this. And as Jane says, you know, it's not only the disruption to the people who work down there, it's a disruption to the town generally. And this idea of actually just abandoning the Whitesands and demolishing the properties down there is a non-starter. You know, see what we used to do in the 60s. You know, we demolished huge areas of our historic environment in order to tackle a problem which, in the end, we didn't solve at the end of the day. And going down the Whitesands this morning, just driving down the Whitesands, I couldn't see the river because of the car park. And that's what we're defending here, is a car park. Parking the car, standing at the Whitesands and looking down the river, we have a real asset there. It's beautiful down there, as long as you've got your back to the car park. And this idea of a rising barrier is a non-starter. It's not going to enhance the area whatsoever. It may tackle the flood problem, or it may not, but it does not cause any improvement whatsoever to what should really be an asset to the town centre. And I agree with Jane. All we're doing, as it says on page 9, 2.4, is agree to the Whitesands project be published as a flood protection scheme. People then got a chance to come back with objections to that. Therefore, I think I agree with your motion, Leader, that we agreed to exactly what EI agreed last week.
Okay, Ian, you want to come back in before you go to the vote? Okay.
Just do that now, Leader? Will I just do that now, Leader? Will I just carry on now? Yep, okay, no, well, listen, the first thing I will do is thank this council. I think it's behaved very professionally this morning. Its behaviour and conduct has been exemplar, so I do appreciate that from everybody, everybody's point of view. As you said earlier, as part of your opening gambit, Leader, this is significantly different, this scheme, compared to what was actually looked at a year past in November. That was your very words. Was the cost a key consideration a year past in November when we chose this particular option, which is now significantly different? Yes, it was. It was one of the main reasons we picked this particular option. £200,000 a week approximately, you can take that either way. It's in and about there. It's went up in cost potentially since that point in time. I think that's significant. Let's be open and transparent. It is in the public interest that we look at this again, the cost price fully costed out. We may come back with the same option, we may choose a different option, but let's look at that. That's my last chance just to say a few words in regards to that, Leader, but I would like members to think about that seriously. This is a 10-year funding package. We're at the very start of it. It doesn't have to be done today.
Jack, you want to say anything?
Just actually following on from what Graham said earlier, I haven't come across any one person in Dumfries that actually wants this scheme. Not one. Go around the town, you speak to people, they don't want it. The first thing they say is, let these councillors that vote for it be warned that there's an election coming.
You should get out more, Jack. Anyway, right, we're going to the vote.
Yeah. We have a motion proposed by Councillor Carruthers that was seconded by Councillor Groom. That motion is not to implement the EE&I decision of 19th December. That is not to publish the scheme until detailed costings for all three options can be considered by the EE&I committee. We have an amendment that's proposed by the Leader, seconded by the Deputy Leader, to proceed with the decision taken by EE&I on 19th December, and therefore essentially that is to publish the scheme. I'll be clear as to the motion and the amendment. We'll proceed to the vote. Okay. Leader.
Amendment.
Deputy Leader.
Amendment.
Councillor Bell.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Brodie.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Motion.
Councillor Karen Carruthers.
Motion.
Councillor Collins. Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Groom.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McCaughtrey.
Amendment.
Councillor McClung.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Mail.
Abstain.
Councillor Marshall.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Peacock.
Amendment.
Councillor Prentice. Councillor Smith. Councillor Stitt.
Amendment.
Councillor Syme.
Amendment.
Councillor Tate. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong sheet. I've not got that. I should have updated these sheets. Councillor Fairbairn. Thank you. Councillor Tuckfield.
Motion.
Councillor Wood.
Abstain.
Councillor Wiper.
Motion.
2 abstentions. Yep. The amendment is carried 22 votes to 12 with 2 abstentions.
Thank you. I have no other business. Thank you.